Hi, my name is Jess Yeaman, and occasionally I do get the opportunity to judge a show or two throughout the year. And I've been asked to talk a little bit about some things that I like and dislike to see in the show ring. The first thing I want to talk about is as I see lambs or goats, whatever the species may be, come to me from the gate as they enter the ring. A lot of times, kids want to stop and set their animal's chest floor up nice and wide and make sure that I get a good view of that animal. And that is absolutely what they need to do. But at the same time, lots of kids want to wait too long before they'll just go ahead and lead out and follow the lamb that precedes them in line. So, my advice on that specific aspect is make sure that I get a good look, but at the same time, don't hold up the progress of the entire show. Another thing, especially if you have a younger showman, those sheep, if they get too far behind the next one, they don't want to keep up. They want to hold back. So it'd be in the showman's best interest as well just to go ahead and move along. That's kind of the first thing. Another thing that I see oftentimes is just along those same lines as we follow that sheep around the ring. Sometimes we'll see kids that make absolutely zero eye contact with me. If they have a really nice sheep and I like how that sheep moves, I want to pull him right then. I'll motion sometimes once, sometimes twice. Becomes a little redundant, and sometimes a ring steward actually has to come in and pull those kids. So that's really not a good thing either. I want them to be paying enough attention and be excited when I pull them so they automatically get to go to the scales. So as those kids bring those sheep into the ring, sometimes as they're walking along, they will put so much focus on the judge that they actually, will get too close or actually run into the person ahead of them in line. So they need to split their time or their attention between not only seeing where the judge is at all times, but also knowing about their surroundings, where they are in the ring. It's also a really good idea for those kids to have watched a few classes ahead of time in the show, because once they get to the show or get to the ring and are actually showing their sheep, I really don't want to have to pull those animals and then tell those kids exactly where they need to be going or if that's a good thing or a bad thing. If they've actually watched a few classes in advance, it really helps them to understand what's going on in the show. As those kids move around the ring, most judges have the lambs or goats, whatever it may be, set up side by side or stacked with their nose to the fence. A lot of times, those kids will come in, crowd the kid next to them. Let's make sure that the young people move their animals at a safe distance from the other lamb so their lamb doesn't disrupt how the other young person's trying to set their animal up or how they're showing. Sometimes I'll see kids that want to move. For instance, if my hand is a fence, I'll see a young person try to bring a lamb too close to the fence. I like to be able to walk in front of those sheep and see their chest floors and see how they're made through their front 1/3. So it's a good idea to pay close attention to what the ring stewards want you to do. Always do what they tell you to do, and at the same time, just try to get your sheep shown as good as possible. Like I was saying, it's one of the pet peeves that I have is when a young person hits or slaps their sheep, especially when they do it hard enough that it's relatively loud or it's pretty audible. I don't ever need to see or hear that in a show ring. There's really no place for that. If you need to discipline your animal, you should be doing that at home and not anywhere near that drastically. So that's one thing that I don't like to see. Again, young people, as you get your lambs set up, whether it be stacked side to side or on profile, uh, always leave enough room between the person in front of you and yourself so that if you're crowded from behind, that you can move up and get set in a position where your animal can be noticed. I see lots of kids that want to follow the person in front of them so closely that when they're asked to stop and set up, they're immediately crowding the person ahead of them. That can really disrupt things and make the show last too long. I guess one thing that I also don't like is having to wait a really long time to help a kid. Now, I'll certainly do that, and especially if it's a younger kid. I mean, every judge should give that kid an opportunity to have that animal set up and driven hard. But when I have to do it many times, especially for an older kid, I have to wait and let him get that sheep set just right before he'll let me touch him. I don't really appreciate that. I'd rather just be able to come in, evaluate the animal, touch him, and back off and go on down the road. I guess we've talked about bringing sheep around. We've talked about stacking them side to side. A lot of times, again, I will walk around in front of a sheep. It's always a good thing when I can see that animal's chest completely. Sometimes kids aren't paying attention. They're still showing as if the judge is behind their lamb instead of in front. Make sure that you know where the judge is, and if I'm walking around in front of that sheep to see his chest floor, that you exhibit that animal in a way that there's nothing in front of him, and you have his head up give me the best impression that I can of that sheep in the 20-30 seconds I may get to see him in that class. Or you may not make the cut, you may not get to go to the scale and go on down the road and possibly place in the class. Another thing, I guess, once we've seen those sheep stacked side to side, I come in and I handle those lambs. And a lot of times right then is when I make a decision whether that sheep is going to the scales for further evaluation or if they're going to head out and then potentially hit the truck. Lots of kids, if they do not get pulled immediately, give up. That's not how you need to be. You need to continue to try your best. You need to continue to do your best. You need to continue to show a positive attitude versus at times some kids get a little angry or they get so disappointed that they quit trying. So if you don't get pulled on the initial handle, don't worry. That doesn't mean it's over. It just means that you need to try even harder as I get that one last look at those animals. Going right along with that, oftentimes it's not the kids that hit the trucks, it's the kids that get close but don't actually win that I see the most attitude out of. That is a very negative thing, and especially to someone that is potentially going to be judging you multiple times throughout your show career, it's never a good idea to say anything sarcastic or smart aleck, I guess you'd say. It's always good to win with a good attitude and lose with a good attitude. It's just one man's opinion that day, and it may be right or wrong, but he's the judge and he's the one that's getting paid to evaluate your animals, so you should treat him accordingly. Right, so we've talked about leading those animals. We've talked about setting those animals up, giving yourself enough room. We've talked about having a good attitude no matter what happens to you in the ring. A few minor details that I always want to bring up. There are some products that you can use, especially say on a goat that you can keep its tail erect. There's sprays that you can put on animals that supposedly make them handle hard, or there's even some conditioners you can put on animals to make alter how their skin feels. I'm not condoning or condemning any certain product, but there are things that you can do that don't hurt the animal at all, that really help their appearance and help the way that they handle. For instance, on a sheep, any kind of conditioner you can put on that animal's hide makes them feel fresher, makes them feel more expressive. I guarantee that a sheep that has a nice, damp, well-conditioned hide is going to do better under me in most cases than a sheep that's very dry, very dehydrated in terms of its hide and how it handles. So it's always a good idea to have your sheep's hide nice and hydrated. That being said, the other extreme is I've handled sheep that have so much oil or so much water on them that my hand comes away absolutely soaking wet, and I have to wipe that off on my pants. Never a good idea. You always want to have that happy medium where the sheep feels really firm and expressive. Moist, I guess, would be a good term to talk about that sheep's hide, but you never want it to be so wet that the judge comes away with actual condensation on his hand. One more thing I want to talk about real briefly is the way you dress when you're in the show ring. You should always try your best to look professional. You should wear pants without holes in them. You should wear some kind of closed-toed shoe that your feet aren't going to be hurt in. You should always tuck your shirt in, if possible wear a button-up shirt. You should try to wear a belt if you have one. Just remember, you're exhibiting your animal, but at the same time, you need to look like you're excited to be there. You need to look like you're proud to be there, and dressing appropriately certainly makes you look that way. Sometimes, especially young ladies, they need to be sure they wear appropriate clothes. Remember that we're in the show ring. There's lots of young kids. We're not here to show ourselves off. We're here to show our animal and get noticed for the right reasons, not the wrong reasons. One of the more recent developments that I've seen in the show ring and outside of the show ring actually is with all the social media that we have and the internet, all the information that we have access to. Talking about the social media just for a minute, oftentimes a judge will be on Facebook and he's not on Facebook to expand his judging career. He's not on Facebook to be friends with people that he's going to judge. That's not why a judge is on Facebook. He's on Facebook or Twitter or whatever it may be, just like for the rest of us, for entertainment and to stay in touch with his friends. And oftentimes you'll see judges tagged in pictures of certain animals. Personally, as a judge, I really don't appreciate that. Just because you tag me in a picture of an animal does not mean A, that I'm going to like that animal, or B, that I'm going to even look at the picture. It just kind of makes me feel like you're trying to get something off my name. Don't really like that. Oftentimes I'll have kids or adults that I've never even met before adding me on Facebook as a friend or requesting to be my friend. Don't really appreciate that, especially if I don't even know who you are as a person. that really doesn't go a long ways. In fact, I would say probably someone with a lot of integrity, that's actually going to hurt you more than going to help you. So it's always a good idea to keep it professional, and if you're not really friends with that person, don't try to take that step and become close acquaintances, so to speak, on some kind of online forum. One other thing that I'd like to mention while we just said that online forum, I've judged several shows, and sometimes you're never going to make anyone happy. Occasionally you'll see a really negative comment posted on some kind of online forum, maybe Facebook, maybe Breeders' World, or whatever forum that may be, MyLam. If you can't say something nice, don't say anything at all. It's probably a really good idea, because us judges, we also get online. We also see some of those things, and certainly doesn't make you feel good. And on top of that, it doesn't ingratiate you to that person as well. So again, I think everyone should try to treat this as an activity that it is. It's for the kids. It's a good thing for the kids. We should never make it about ourselves and our egos. So just stay away from doing those kinds of things and be nice.